Thanks for joining us for another edition of The Small Business Show with Jim Fitzpatrick, exclusively on ASBN.com.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of The Small Business Show right here at ASBN.com. Brands are taking bold risks, and while some are winning big, others are stumbling. But at the end of the day, it's not just about taking risks, it's about making sure your campaigns resonate and build a connection with today's consumers. So today we are diving into both sides of this conversation with Bill Harper, the CEO and Chief Creative Officer at BrandBossHQ. You've seen him here before at ASBN. Bill, thank you so much for joining us on the show once again.
Jim, always a pleasure to be here. Who are we going to talk about today?
There's a lot to talk about today because I don't think you can spend a second on TikTok or any other social platform where people aren't going crazy over their favorite restaurant brand. And I'm talking about Cracker Barrel. I don't probably even need to tell you that, right?
And, it is one of the craziest ones that I have seen. Like, I thought it was bad for Jaguar, but Cracker Barrel is on a whole nother level. And I'll tell you when I knew that it was really a big deal is when it spilled into LinkedIn. Because most of the time, this level of commentary sort of stays on its own over in the, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook side of the world. Yeah. But all of a sudden, you couldn't get on LinkedIn without having the first 5 or 6 posts be somebody's particular rant against what was happening at Cracker Barrel. So this has been a really interesting one to watch.
Yeah, there's no question about it. So you are the official person here for branding, all things branding, that we turn to in times like this, as we did with Jaguar. So what's your take on this whole thing?
So I think that this is the public's sort of hurrah about quit changing brands without there being a reason behind it, right? And so they sort of like had a moment with Jaguar, and then Range Rover came out with the new emblem that they were doing, and it wasn't even something they were going to put on the cars, as I understand it. It was just a mark that they created to use, and everybody went sort of bonkers on that. And then when Cracker Barrel came out and really just followed the same playbook, I think consumers raised their hands on social media and said, enough. Like, what they basically did was water it down so much that it looked like every other food brand. It looked exactly like IHOP. It looked exactly like Denny's. It looked exactly like Red Robin. Yep. And I think the people's response was, stop taking away the thing that makes a brand and just homogenizing it down into something that we can't even recognize anymore. And boy, did they go after them.
Yeah, there's no question. When a company does things like this, what's their objective? I mean, it's a very successful company, and everybody knows that brand. It'd be like changing the Coca-Cola recipe, I suppose, or the color red, or something like that with Coca-Cola. What is their objective when doing something like this?
Well, it's interesting that you talk about Coke, because I think Coca-Cola, when it did its expansion, was doing it for 2 reasons. Number one, I think they did it because they realized that the people who drink soft drinks, sugary soft drinks, was declining. And so they wanted to try to expand the brand to allow for other things. And some of those have been successful and some of them haven't. I've forgotten now what the natural one with the cane sugar was that just they stopped producing it. It was in the green can because it wasn't successful.
Right.
But I think in this case, although I wasn't on the deciding board in any way, shape, or form, if you take a look at the stock price over the last 5 years, you'll notice that it has been in decline. And so I imagine what probably happened was somebody at the top brass said, hey, we've had this legacy brand in place for a long time. Our, in this case, our typical customer is aging and won't be with us forever. The younger generations that are coming up behind them aren't exactly value aligned the same way that the traditional folks were. We'd better find a way to get ourselves in line with the younger generation.
Yeah.
But where it stops is there doesn't seem to be the research necessary to truly understand what that migration would be. What seems like is happening is they say, well, we'll just try to make it available to everybody. And it becomes this whitewash stripping away of anything that was of any interest about the brand at all. And it seems like it's almost an operational or finance decision to come in and say, if we're going to have clutter, let's only do it in these areas. And if we're going to have things hanging on the walls, let's only do them, it would be a lot less expensive if we didn't hang stuff on all the walls, if we just did it in these little 3-foot squares. And let's don't, to maximize seating, let's don't do these unique, wood tables that look like picnic benches. Instead, let's just go get some laminate tables because we can seat an extra 2.5% of people here to do that. And it feels super operational, super like icky, like no personality, nothing. And I think that's what people are having such a reaction to. It's just not the brand anymore. Now it's just, there's big blue IHOP and there's big yellow Denny's. And now there's this big sort of orange Cracker Barrel used to be thing that's trying to find its way in there among the Red Robins and the Red Lobsters. And I think people are just sick of the genericizing of these businesses.
Yes. When something like this happens and you're a brand expert, do you, and obviously you didn't sit on the committee that says let's change it, but will they bring in an expert now to say, how do we fix it? How do they win over their customers now that the damage is done? Do they revert back to the old brand? Do they kind of bring in some elements from it? Or do they leave it alone and say, you guys will adapt and we're going to move forward whether you like it or not?
It's a really interesting question, and I think part of why Cracker Barrel is getting such a black eye right now is because both the CEO first went on a talk show and said, in the wake of like all the negativity, we have been getting an overwhelmingly positive response, which was a completely foolish thing to say, because everybody looking around the world was like, are you kidding? Like it's every other comment online.
Show me one.
And then, as if that weren't enough, the CMO a week later trots out and says, we're doubling down. Our values haven't changed, and this is all going to wind up being rosy at the end of the day. So both the CEO and the CMO have sort of linked arms in some way, shape, or form to do this joint, we're in it to win it kind of nonsense. And the world is calling BS on them left and right, going, this isn't working. Your stock price is crashing on top of the loss that you were already getting. Like, this is going the exact opposite direction.
Right.
So I think, if this follows the standard format, one of two things will happen. Either the top brass will say, this is just a phase and people are getting acclimated to the change and they're going to settle down. And when they settle down, they're going to kind of forget about it and everybody will just move into a new thing and the stock will begin to rise. And if that's the case, then the CEO probably has about 22 more months out of the 24-month, we'll see if it works window. If not, what'll happen is it'll be more like a Bud Light thing where they'll let just enough of the press go by and then they'll grab everybody by the ear and walk them to the front door, in which case it'll be 3 or 4 months. So, either they are able to prove that there's some kind of a boomerang benefit to this thing that ultimately benefits the bottom line, or you're going to have a couple of people that are very quickly going to be unceremoniously dethroned and then replaced. And it really depends on the top brass. And in this particular case, the leadership and ownership of this particular brand have had nothing but a history of difficulty in terms of their hiring practices, their managerial practices. So, it seems from the outside, having never had the benefit of meeting anybody, that this is a pretty hard-headed bunch that wants to just do what they want to do, the way they want to do it, when they want to do it. And for whatever reason, they've chosen this path. Now the rest of us get to sit back with our popcorn and watch, what happens in the second act.
Who benefits from this? The other restaurants, the other chains where, people will vote, as they say, with their pocketbook and their wallet to say, I'm not going there, but then they have to eat. And of course, if you're traveling on the road, you got to make up your mind where you're going to eat, and if it's not Cracker Barrel, do companies like IHOP or Denny's or the ones that you've mentioned, do they benefit from times like this when a brand goes south?
In my opinion, the biggest problem with this is that nobody benefits, and let me tell you why. Because when you go to Denny's and IHOP are already in a race to the bottom, right? They're already at we've got the $3.99 pancakes.
Right.
No, we've got the $3.59 pancakes, right? So they're already down at that level.
Right.
And now Cracker Barrel has just taken away the whole this is the place where family and country time and all the rest of that comes together. So now they're right in the throes of, well, now we're going to go to 329. So there's nowhere to go but down.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is that, when the brands aren't known for anything any longer, then it literally is whoever's closest, cheapest, fastest, or hell, why don't we just cook something at home? And so I think actually everybody loses in this case. I don't think anybody benefits. And I think that's the big lesson that these established legacy brands don't realize, is that when you lose, Denny's for years and years had the $1.99 out of your mind thing. And that was, they owned the breakfast segment that way. And, IHOP was the smile, and you could get lunch at any time. And there were these little things that the brands were known for, and that's why people would choose them. When you strip all that away and the only thing left is price, and darn well that the eggs are coming out of a big plastic bag in the back, then it's like, well, why choose any of them?
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going to happen. I think that either small restaurants, emerging restaurants, new chains that haven't been tried will get an at bat, or people will start eating more at home, or they will do other things to find unique experiences to replace what was just taken away from them.
Sure. And what's interesting is when you look at the demographics and that concern of, well, these people are dying off, and we want to go for a younger customer that comes in, but in many times that younger customer may be going in because it's reminiscent of the times that they spent with their parents or grandparents. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And I think there's some magic there.
I think so, absolutely. And that goes right back to that unique thing. We have a different memory for each of those places based on things that happened in our lives.
Right.
And a lot of those are shared experiences. I think two things stand out to me that are really interesting about this that businesses can learn from. The first is there has been no mention of the research. None.
Okay.
None that I can find. There's been nothing that said, well, we did it because we found these insights. We did it because we found that people felt this way, which suggests either that it wasn't strong research or it was never done.
Right.
And more likely it wasn't done at all.
Yeah.
Or the wrong kind of research was done that gave them weird conclusions. And the second was they committed, Jim, $700 million to this revamp before it was ever tested.
Wow.
That's just foolish investment. So $700 million. I mean, and if you remember back in the day, and I don't have the exact number for how much they paid for it, but when Pepsi redid their logo, and I mean, this is like the classic, they're never going to get this egg off their face because it was such a big story. They spent $150 million, some ridiculous amount of money on a logo refresh. And it was like every designer in the world was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And, Tropicana did it and fell down.
Yeah.
Pepsi did it and fell down. These brands that just keep bottom leveling.
Yeah, and they're iconic brands.
It just messes them up. And for so much money, why? It's not only does that model not work, but it's costly and it doesn't work. And it hasn't just not worked for them. It has not worked as an approach for any of these brands that did it this way.
Right.
So at some point, someone has to stop saying, well, we never got fired for hiring IBM, so let's spend as much money as humanly possible to make sure that we covered our butts. It would be so much better to actually go find the people that would do the process thoroughly and come back and say, this is a reasonable reason why we're doing it. Yeah. And that certainly doesn't require, I mean, don't get me wrong. If they came to my agency with $700 million, I would politely decline only half of it. But I'm just saying that $700 million.
They could have gotten such a deal.
I'm so magnanimous. But I think, it's such a ridiculous amount of money. It's just not even real. Who throws $700 million behind this before they've done something to prove out the concept? It just doesn't make any sense.
Right, which is just, you could start a whole nother chain with $700 million.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And still preserve the brand at Cracker Barrel,
Well, and I'm trying to figure out, last point, how long it's going to take before it stops. McDonald's reimagined itself into basically a personality-less box. Taco Bell did it. I mean, you can literally go around the block and it's like, what are they trying to do when they just turn it into modular Legos? At what point does that, when do people go, you know what, hey, We all look and sound exactly the same except for a couple of color choices.
Right.
Like, when does that sink in? So I guess the world has just finally had enough of it was like, well, when Cracker Barrel, my favorite one was put the cracker back in the barrel, which just killed me that I saw a comedian do the other day online. I was like, well, there you go.
Do you remember when, I say remember, it was just, I guess, a couple of years ago when IHOP came out and said, we're changing it to International House of Burgers, or I think they said
IHOB.
IHOB, right. which was a B, and then they had, what do you think the B stands for? And that was a little bit of a, contest there. And of course, that was just a one and done campaign, right?
Yeah.
They didn't really change it to International House of Burgers.
Yeah, it did not do very well for them. The group that did it better was Burger King, who was really suffering a lack of visibility, who pretended to take the Whopper off and then filmed people having a conniption fit about the fact that the Whopper was no longer available. Now,
right.
That was a smart campaign because what it did was reinforce the demand and appreciation for a timeless part of the menu, right? Like, you don't threaten to take the Whopper away. Like, you
right.
just can't do that, right? Like, people will go up in arms, and they did. But what was nice about that campaign was, number one, it wasn't real. Number two, what it did was reinforce just how much people truly love it. And that was the same thing that New Coke did for old Coca-Cola, which was also in decline when they did that.
Yep.
So I think the sort of lesson that we can learn here is brands that are in decline have a tendency to overcompensate. Mm-hmm. And what they need to do instead is make sure that they truly understand why people are no longer giving the same support that they had done to the brand, and then do a lesser shift that gives them another reason to re-engage, instead of just saying, well, that's it, we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and here's what we've decided to do next, And people don't tend to respond to that kind of change well.
No. What is your recommendation for companies and small business owners and business owners what's the takeaway from this, or what do you want it to be, that with regard to those business owners that say, I think my brand is stale, or I think it's just time for a change? You wake up one morning as a business owner, you think, oh, wow, maybe I'll just change the colors and we'll change the logo and we'll freshen it up, or we'll give it a new look, and that'll do it. That'll connect with a whole group of people. When in reality, that might not even be the problem. It might be something else in your product lineup or your pricing or whatever the case might be. But it seems to me to be a easy lever for business owners to pull, to think that that's going to be the most successful lever and the easiest one that they could pull to make an impact in their bottom line.
Yeah, businesses get restless all the time. Kit Kat just did a package design that was another one where everybody was like, why? Like, what did you change and why?
Yeah.
The only thing people think about when they buy a product is what's in it for me.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only thing. All products are irrelevant. The only thing that the product exists for is to get something that they're after. So I buy the Whopper to feel nostalgic. I buy the hammer and nail to hang the picture on the wall. So I don't care about the thing. I care about what the thing gives me and how that changes my life for the better.
Right.
So if your people aren't buying from you the same way anymore, what it means is that your relevance factor has dropped. Mm-hmm. And that could be a number of things, but that's why starting with research is so incredibly important, is understanding, why don't you like us anymore?
Right.
What is it? And you can't always get that answer from people because they are either not comfortable or they don't know the vocabulary to express that appropriately. So what you say instead is, what do you like so much about these other things that you're choosing to do, and why? And what they do in their choice descriptions is that they reveal what they value. Mm-hmm. And once you understand that, you can say, oh, okay, so we've lost step here or here or here. Now we can make substantive changes that are actually relevant and meaningful to people, instead of saying, well, what we need to do is we need to change the entire concept, and we need to change the entire feel, and we need to change the entire look, and we need to change the entire thing just to feel new.
Yeah.
It is far, far, far more likely, and certainly less costly, to sit down with people and say, why don't you tell me what changed? Why don't you tell me what you like about these other new things?
Right. And
that really gives you the insight you need to make those surgical changes that will actually matter.
Yeah.
And if it's well, it just got old and boring, like Toys R Us, I think, kind of suffered that, right? Like, the concept had gone on for so long, shelving wasn't up to par with their competitors, the look and feel wasn't up to par,
That's right.
nothing had been updated. So it just fell out of favor. And eventually it fell out of favor to bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And so I think you really need to just stay in touch with your target audience and hear why do you like what you like right now?
Yeah.
Why don't you like what you don't like right now? And when you hear that, then you've actually got something with traction that you can stand on.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And all too often you'll see where CEOs sometimes with their own egos, they just want to put their own stamp on it. You know what I mean? To say, during my tenure as the CEO of that company, I gave it my own look and feel, and this is what I'm bringing to the company's brand, over time. And
I want to give you a really interesting hot take on that. I think CEOs, they get a bad rap for that a little bit, but I want to put you in the position of being hired. Okay, so you've just been hired to fix and Best Buy, I don't know, Sears, whatever, right?
Right.
It's abject terror. I think it's a lot less about ego than it is about, oh my gosh, I better do something that works. And I think in that moment,
True.
They draw on whatever toolbox they happen to have through their own personal experience.
Sure.
I saw this work somewhere. I believe that this would make the difference. And then they throw their all behind it. I don't know if it's so much about ego. Here's where the hate mail comes. I don't know if it's so much about ego as it is about, oh my gosh, I hope that this is right.
Yeah.
And then, I don't want to quit just because somebody doesn't like change. So I'm going to throw my weight behind it, which then gets them the rep of they were so egotistical they weren't willing to listen to anybody. I think the pressure in that position is enormous to succeed. I think that the stakes are very, very high. And I think that the person who is hired to come in, where the vast majority of the company are people who have worked together before they were there, knew each other, have been through the process, have seen change from the inside, who are reticent to believe in somebody new and something new anyway. And then this person comes in and has to be strong enough to actually move the ship in a new direction.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of pressure on that individual to try to get it right and to get everybody to do it.
I agree. And I'm probably not being fair enough to a lot of the CEOs where it's not their ego. Some of them are brought in to take care of that task, where they say the last leader was fighting the board on this. He or she didn't want to change. We want there to be a change. We're looking for a leader that can champion that and run with it. Are you the one? So sometimes, I've seen situations like that happen, where those are the orders given to the new CEO that we want this brand to change. So
and even think about that for a second, right? The thing you have to say to get hired is different than the skill you're going to need to make change.
Yeah.
Because the group that wants to hire you wants to hear what they want to hear.
Right.
The change in and of itself is quite probably something different.
Yeah.
And so, the CEO that walks in and is like, okay, so my package is $500,000 a year plus these bonus structures plus this. And the people are like, yeah, okay. Did you say the things we needed to hear? Did you look the way we want you to look? Do you act the way we want you to act? And then, by the way, we want you to go in and make change, which we're probably terrified of and reticent to make ourselves. So, it's understandable how these people get into these positions and then are like, hell, I'm going for broke.
Right.
This could be my last job, right? Like, I do this badly and it winds up in the press the wrong way, and who's going to hire me next time? So I think that there's a lot at play.
That's right. I would agree. Bill Harper, it's always great catching up with you. You give us such wisdom as it relates to all things marketing and specifically branding for business owners. And I know that a lot of our viewers and business owners get a lot out of your visits here with us. So thank you so much, Bill Harper.
We appreciate
CEO
it. Thank you.
And Chief Creative Officer and a very creative guy of BrandBossHQ. Thank you so much for stopping by. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Jim. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of The Small Business Show with Jim Fitzpatrick, exclusively on ASBN.com.